Our next panellist is Callum Anderson. Callum is a member of the Labour Bame Network Steering Committee and was formerly Parliamentary Candidate in Bedfordshire South West. So now over to you, Callum. Please share your experience.
Thanks, Mariana, and thanks everyone for coming on the call. It's great to see almost 50 people online now. I guess my USP for this conversation is that I'm mixed race for a start. I didn't grow up in a city, or including London. I grew up in a small market town in Bedfordshire. So I actually was able to stand in the area that I grew up in last December. I was also an only child, so very much opposite experience to Abdi. But I was also product of a single parent household. Although I did have a stepfather who actually, or I do have a stepfather who actually worked, was a police officer for 30 years in the UK. And so my kind of, my feelings when I think about the policing both in the UK and the US, although, you know, there are many differences, there are also similarities. And, you know, we've all seen, you know, recent, you know, cases, you know, whether that be Mark Duggan or Sarah Reid, where, you know, the police obviously haven't behaved as they should do. And I always think of the, you know, the Robert Peel's principles of policing. One of them, you know, one of the big kind of major principles are that, you know, one of the big quotes rather is that the police are the public and the public are the police. And I think that's, you know, that written over, you know, almost 200 years ago, I think is quite, I think a powerful statement. And I think we have to consider when we're talking about all of our institutions is that they aren't just bodies independent of us, our communities. We have the power to change them. And look, I've been pretty lucky in the sense that, you know, the byproduct not living in a big city in a big urban centre such as London is that you don't get, and I didn't face many of the, you know, stop and search challenges or the kind of what you would say traditional systemic racisms, but rather was more facing the, I guess what I'd call middle class racisms. So for example, obviously my mother is a white woman and I am not white. And so when I was very, very young, you know, a lot of generally, I think concerned elderly people, white people, would often ask my mum, you know, if she was pushing me around in the town centre, whether I was hers, or whether, you know, or would praise her for having adopted, you know, taken me on board. As time went on, you know, a lot of the challenges were then around comments, you know, or rather, you know, misuse of certain terms. So, you know, certainly in the first, say, 12, 13 years of my life. So, you know, often term coloured or half caste were kind of bandied about. And I think it's only when you kind of, you know, when I'm kind of as an adult, you only realise, certainly on the latter, quite how offensive it is. For those of you who don't know, caste is Latin for purity. And so, you know, basically you're saying, you know, the message is technically saying if you ever label anyone that you're half pure, which, you know, is obviously pretty offensive. I think as I went through school, I think for me, you know, whilst you don't have the systemic racism I said earlier, I think what you don't have is that you don't have the community aspect. You're not, you know, I was in the street, in my street, I was the only person of colour in the whole street. In classrooms at school, certainly for the first, I'll probably say up until high school, I'd be the only person of colour in the class. You know, sometimes depending on the lesson, there might be, you know, one or two others, but otherwise you were kind of quite alone. You know, you're quite alone in that aspect. And the other challenge for them is that then you don't see, you know, when people talk about what they want to be when they grow up, you know, if you want to be a doctor or you want to be a lawyer or a businessman, whilst I didn't have, you know, what Martin suffered of saying, you know, maybe you should change something else, there wasn't actually there wasn't the suite of role models, but, you know, that's the example that you can follow. And I think kind of partner to that is then the sense of belonging. I think, you know, we'll talk later about how we can about policy proposals about how we kind of, you know, build, you know, close down those inequities. And I think before we even start to challenge that, I think we also need to be thinking about what we're learning and you know, what our children are learning. That when I was growing up, you know, I did history up to A level, and I didn't learn once about the British Empire. I know I think my understanding, having spoken to others, is that some people do learn about it, but I learned little to no history about British Empire or about Black history in general. You know, I think I did a module in civil rights you know, before A level, and I think as we challenge those different inequities, whether that's in our criminal justice system, in our mental health, how we kind of tailor mental health provisions to certain groups, I think it's really important that we are, you know, not erasing history, as some people have said, but actually really giving people a full, holistic education about all the types of people, whether that's Mary Seacole, whether that's the, you know, 20,000 West Indian soldiers that, you know, alongside other peoples in the Commonwealth, you know, India or Pakistan, when they were fighting for Britain's freedoms in both of the world wars, that actually that's part of British history. It's not separate, segmented history. That it's actually beginning part of the whole of British history. And so I think when we, you know, we'll talk about it later, and I'm sure a lot of you will have really good ideas about what we need to do. But I think we need to be asking a lot more of our employers. You know, anyone who's been on LinkedIn in the last week has probably been under siege from lots of people saying about how they're listening and how they're, you know, the black squares. But we actually need to be challenging FTSE 100 companies, big employers, about what they're going to do to help, alongside making sure that, you know, all of our children are being taught a really genuine history of the UK. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.